Hello, Tampa Bay fans. You're listening to The William Haynes Show, your online radio home for Tampa Bay sports talk and Rays postgame shows. Stay tuned throughout baseball season for live coverage after most Rays games with comprehensive coverage of all 162 games from April through October. Got something to say? We'd love to hear it. Give us a call, internationally toll-free. 877-566-1020, or send us a tweet at WHBC Official. Don't go anywhere. Tonight's program will be starting in just a couple of minutes.
HBC. Another tough break for the Rays. What else is new? For the first time in a while, it is a good evening to you, and how you be? William Haynes here, you there, here at 11:11 on this Tuesday night. This Rays postgame edition of the William Haynes Show is live from the temporary WHBC studio in Clearwater, Florida. We are not in the permanent Clearwater WHBC studio. That'll be a couple weeks away, so a little bit of a strange setup. Hopefully the audio and everything is okay. Had to change some things around, but it is very good to be back. The last show that we did, if you can even remember this far back, it was Thursday, April 29th. It was an afternoon game to finish a 4-game set against the Oakland A's. The NFL draft was that night. Later after the game, that 3-2 loss dropped them to the Rays to 13-13. And so, of course, we missed the 3-game home series against the Astros, where Houston won 2-1. And then, of course, that 5-2 road trip, including the 4-game sweep of the Los Angeles Angels and the 2-1 series loss in Oakland against the Athletics. And, of course, tonight's 3-1 loss at the hands of the New York Yankees drops the Rays to 19-18, and unless something has changed, to 4th place in the American League East. So I wouldn't say that things are too incredibly different from where we left them when during that show. The Rays were in the midst, starting kind of that 3 for 59 stretch, hitting with runners in scoring position. It didn't get that bad until the end of that Houston series. And so the topic of discussion then really doesn't differ much at all from the topic of discussion that's being had right now. It's just the Rays, the pitching has been excellent. That's held through now. I think this was game number 37 of the season, so that certainly hasn't changed, but the offense is really not going much either. They are definitely struggling way too much against left-handed pitching, particularly the starters. We know, thinking back to that week or so ago, that stretch I think where they faced 4 maybe lefties in 5 days or something with the Blue Jays series, and then that Oakland Athletics series at home. And with another lefty on the mound in Jordan Montgomery, who the Rays have had success against in recent memory. This was their third game against Montgomery already this season. A lot of games against the New York Yankees, of course, and I would say it would be good that we won't have to see them much after this, but it seems to be the only team that the Rays can play against. I think they're, if you take away their games against New York, they are under 500 on the season. When you're 19-18 right now, that's certainly not a good thing. But they really struggle against Montgomery. He goes 6 innings, allowing just 1 run tonight. That was that absolute mammoth blast, 472 feet off the bat of Mike Zunino to left center. And that was since the StatCast era in 2015. And I also saw something since 2008. That is the longest home run hit in Tropicana Field, at least by a Rays player. Since that. And then I think in the history, like before StatCast, it was probably, I think, the 4th longest home run hit in a stadium, period, which is very impressive. That also tied Mike Zunino with the team lead in home runs with 7. He's tied with Austin Meadows in that regard, so things, talking about that, certainly haven't changed, and really none of the stats have changed. Just trying to do a quick recap because, of the games that we missed, because I know everyone was following and things like that, but just to keep up with what was going on. It seems like right now where we stand, just about everyone offensively is in a slump, but there was times more so against the Angels than against the A's, and certainly not much offense to be had against the Houston Astros in that series. But Willy Adames with a couple of big home runs, Austin Meadows, Brandon Lau, Manny Margot, the guys that need to be producing for the Rays to have success were doing so. And I think I correctly predicted in saying that they're in a 162 game season, there is going to be that nature of the law of averages where the Rays were in a stretch where they were facing a lot of good pitching. Kansas City, the Blue Jays, and the Athletics, and even the Astros, if you want to go that far as well. But you're not going to be playing all those series against good teams. In fact, I think going into this week, the Rays had played 3 more games than anyone else in baseball against teams above 500. So the schedule certainly has not gone Tampa Bay's way. They have just finished the 30 games and 31 day stretch. The off day yesterday ended that really trying stretch. And not only did they have all those games back to back, but it was also against pretty good teams. I mean, you throw in the Boston series in there as well, and I think they're at least 10 games over 500, and they are certainly running things right now in the AL East. And as I said, against the Royals, Blue Jays, Athletics, Astros. But then you go on the road, and I think that 4-game sweep of LA, the Angels, I think that was really the saving grace, because even if they had just won that series 3-1, or they had split it, whatever, I think right now the fan base kind of has the sky is falling attitude anyway, but just that would magnify it even more so. And on that stretch, they had won 5 in a row, and they were a season-high watermark 3 games above 500, and I was thinking I would be coming back on the air and maybe talking about a team that's right there in first place, and they've turned the corner, blah, blah, blah. And then, really, I don't think anything to be too discouraged of, but they lose that series to the Athletics 2-1, and they lose the season series against them as well, so if it comes down to the wild card standings, that's not a good thing. And something that we had talked about with the first couple months of the season is you're going to get tested against playoff teams, and might not be a good chance to stack up wins, but it's a good chance to stack yourself up against the competition and see kind of where we are. Is this team, really have what it takes to follow up that 2020 where they were the champions of the American League? And right now, I think we can all agree that they are not really stacking up quite so much. I think in some ways it's reminiscent to 2019 where, yes, to win 95, 96 games in a season, you're going to have to stack up a lot of wins against not so good teams and maybe, just do okay against the good teams, and, the wins will pile up. And so I think to an extent the Rays have done that. And the schedule, the month of May is going to be tough. I'm seeing obviously the Yankees-Mets homestand. That could get weird, and the Rays are going to have to face Garrett Cole tomorrow, which I don't think is a positive thing. You got 4 games in Dunedin against the Blue Jays. That's going to be weird. You're going to have to play the Royals again. But then you get into the month of June and things get a little bit easier. New York, Texas, Baltimore, and, Seattle, teams like that. So my point in saying that is the law of averages. We are going to see more stretches like that 5-game winning streak, and they're really beating up on some bad teams. And I mean, I knew the Angels were bad, but I didn't know really they were quite that bad in seeing really mainly the bullpen and how ineffective they were, because I don't think the Angels starting a rotation is terrific either, but the Rays, that's a big issue as well. There was talk tonight, and it's really starting to stack up, struggles against left-handed pitching, but also a failure to get runs off of the starting pitcher. And just to look at that Angels series, mind you, I mean, they won all 4 of the games in the 4-game series, but to look at the starters they went up against, they did get some runs off Jose Quintana, 3 2/3 of 5 runs. But then you look at the 3 games following, Alex Cobb, 5 innings of no earned runs in a game they went on to win 8-3. The very next day, Shohei Ohtani, 5+ innings of work with no runs in a game they went on to win 3-1. And then in the series finale, it was Andrew Heaney, of all people, 6 2/3 scoreless in a game that the Rays went on to win 8-3. So had not been for that horrific Angels bullpen, who knows really how that series goes, because the starters were really shutting them down, and of course the lefties in that stretch as well, so that kind of compounded the struggles. Not only are they inefficient against starting pitchers, but then you throw in that they're lefties as well, and throw everything out the window. And thankfully they were able to get some runs off of some not so good pitchers. And I think the offensive numbers were certainly inflated, and I'm not sure that any of us was really buying into that was going to be a thing long term, that the offense was going to start being some kind of juggernaut, scoring 7 or 8 runs every night. But I mean, the home run, I know that Meadows hit in one of those games was just a meatball, like middle. I know Adames had a line drive home run, but not terrific pitching is the point. And I don't know that you would consider Jordan Montgomery to be, one of those stellar pitchers, but he goes 6 innings of just 1 run allowed. And then you compound that as well with the struggles that kind of the Rays starting pitching has been having. And they always end up having pretty good starts. But even with Tyler Glasnow, we saw this, on Sunday against the Athletics in Oakland, that there was another 2 or 3 runs in the first inning. So even our ace of the staff is struggling to kind of get settled into games. So you combine those two things where your starting pitchers are giving up 2 or 3 runs early in games, and your opponent's starting pitcher is going into the 5th or 6th inning scoreless. And against bullpens that a lot of these teams have, it's just going to be difficult to score runs and really to win games. And I don't know, Bally Sports, I mean, they show it dang near every game. I believe the last time I saw it, the Rays were, I think, 2-9, 2-10 when their opponent scores first, and something crazy, 10 games over 500 when the Rays score first. But lately, the Rays have not done a lot of scoring first, and that was the case tonight. The New York Yankees put up a run in the first inning, 2 out, bases empty, home run for Aaron Judge, which was not a terrible pitch from Luis Patino, who got the start for the Rays. They get a run in the 3rd and a run in the 7th. And then, of course, it was just that Mike Sino solo home run to lead off the 3rd inning was the lone offense on the box score for the Rays. And, there was another runners in scoring position, failed opportunity. And, at this point, do we even really need to have that discussion? Of course we will, because it's one of the main narratives going for this team right now. But it's getting old, and it's getting old quickly. I think we're all very frustrated with what we're seeing. Thankfully, this team has held its head really above water at 19-18. I think to still be above 500 is a good thing. We might be back to 500 tomorrow against Garrett Cole. Who knows how that's going to go? Looking at the American League East standings right now, it's Boston at 22-15 in first place, and the Rays are all the way down in 4th place, albeit only 3 games back of first. So all those teams kind of clumped up there, and the Yankees 3 games over, and the Blue Jays 2 games over 500. So the Orioles, I think, are at 4 games under, are probably kind of already out of the running. But it's probably at least until July or through July, it's going to be a 4-team race potentially for first place. And so the Rays are going to start. They're going to need to start having something going at some point, and it's definitely not right now. So hopefully, one day maybe things will just click and the offense changes. There's also that weird narrative that are the Rays having trouble scoring at home? Is it a Tropicana Field thing? They've really struggled at home offensively, and it seems like every time they go on the road, they have this offensive explosion that they're not able to carry over to the following homestand. I'm not quite sure that I would give that much any weight, but it certainly is something to hold in consideration. I know really ever since Willy Adames came up, there's been the home Willie versus road Willie, and Willy Adames on the road offensively is a much better player, so I don't know exactly what's going on from there. So I believe at this juncture we are just about caught up. We have all the roster moves to talk about. I can't believe out of everything being said, and I have yet to mention that Yoshi Tsutsugo was designated for assignment today, and we will await to see what assignment he will be designated to, whether that's if he will accept a minor league assignment or he elects to basically claim free agency because no one is going to claim him off waivers. So they either release him outright, I don't think they would trade him, or he accepts, which he doesn't have to because of his contract as an international free agent. But he can voluntarily elect to be sent down to AAA Durham. I'll give you kind of what I would say on that. If I was Yoshi, I would probably just take the opportunity to play in Durham and for a little bit. But whether there's money elsewhere or he would just like to seek another opportunity, that would be up to him. But of course, Yoshi Tsutsugo has been a big part of the narrative early this season. Of course, he's the second, or I guess at this point was the second highest paid player on the team, owed $7 million. And if this team falls a little bit short, in the big picture at the end of the season, I think really one of the first things you look at, and something we rarely do, but you point to the front office and you blame them for that move that was made, because that $12 million over 2 years that they gave to Yoshi Tsutsugo was money potentially that could have been used elsewhere, whether it was Nelson Cruz, Howie Kendrick, who I think might have already retired, if I'm not mistaken, but that was going into the 2020 season. So but the point being is, we always talk about, the Rays, they don't have money to spend, so that's why they can't get good players and free agency, etc. Well, they did have money. That's been a part of this team's history. Whenever they're contending and they're in kind of a win now mode, where all those prospects for years and years are finally up in the bigs and performing, Stu and company will dump a little bit of money into the team. And so they had, maybe Stu told Eric Neander, I've got $12 to $15 million to spend. Our pitching is fine. Let's get an offensive piece. And so they go to a guy in Yoshi Tsutsugo, who was one of the best stars in the NPB, which is the professional league, professional baseball league in Japan, and he was a slugger, first baseman type, and certainly a guy maybe that could hit 25, 30 home runs on the upside. Add that to your lineup that was already very good in 2019, and obviously that was the expectation for him. But Tsutsugo, that never really turned out. I think there was always a concern from the jump that he was going to struggle with major league fastballs, because of course really anyone that can throw 95, they're not going to be playing in Japan, because a major league team is going to want to sign them over to the States. So you're not facing that same velocity. The quality of play is a little bit lower. I believe scouts consider those, whether it's in South Korea or in Japan, that those are the equivalent of maybe 4A baseball between AAA and the big leagues, as far as level of competition. And so just because he can hit at that level doesn't mean that it was ever going to transfer over to the majors. So I ultimately was right. I think I kind of changed my mind right before the season. I was definitely not anti-Yoshi. I wanted him to succeed, but I just wasn't buying it. I know a lot of people were at his defense making excuses, and they may be right, and there is weight to it. That talk about a bad time to come over to a new country with the COVID pandemic happening right as he was beginning his American career, a month into his first spring training and the entire world gets shut down, and that he's trying to learn potentially a new language and obviously a new country. I could not imagine kind of what that stress and anxiety would bring. And players have always said that off the field stuff, with baseball being such a mental game, that certainly can transfer over to the on-field side. And I don't want to point fingers or play psychologist and diagnose this guy. That's not my job. I don't know all that information, but it's something to think about. And the Rays and Eric Neander, because of course they had to, whether it was a conference call or a statement that they released, Neander was saying that there is still a very good player inside Yoshi, and it's just we're not seeing him right now. So that would lead me to believe they're going to make a really hard push to have him stay and accept that assignment to AAA Durham. I think maybe he could just hit the reset button on things. Durham is it's a nice place to live. It's a beautiful city, and the bright lights of the big leagues won't be shining on him, and he can just take a deep breath and get back to the basics, just putting the barrel on the baseball effectively, because it seemed like in most of his at-bats he was either striking out or rolling over to first base. And for a guy that they had hitting leadoff to start the year, and again, a guy upside 25, potentially 30 home runs, he was not giving you any of that. He had that game-winning double against Garrett Cole, of all people, a few weeks ago, and a lot of us thought that could be the turning point. And he had another couple of pretty big hits as well, but they were few and far between, and it never looked as if things were going to start going in a different direction. He was going to be a 150 hitter that will occasionally come through with a big hit, and with all the guys that they have, not just at the big league level, but at the minor leagues as well, there was just no room for Yoshi. I think one of the biggest parts of kind of this Yoshi experiment, all of that, was that Ji-Man Choi was hurt. I don't even know what they would have done if Ji-Man Choi was healthy to start the year, because of course Choi would have been the everyday first baseman, and so they, with that space in the starting lineup open, it was a place for Yoshi to play, because before then he had only played third base and left field and obviously designated hitter, and he was not effective at either of those defensive positions. And why do you want a 150 hitter taking up the DH spot in your lineup? So they could have him play the field. He never really looked comfortable at first base, even though that's where he played the most in Japan, so that's kind of a curious thing as well. He's not extremely athletic. I mean, he had some nice moments, but again, nothing that ever really compounded. There was never any consistency with his game. It was always kind of not even flashes of brilliance, but flashes of competence, and then everything else was falling short of that mark. And so, this is obviously a decision that the Rays have been mulling over for a long time, because there's no, money aside, if money is no object, if we're the New York Yankees, you get rid of this guy in a second. There's no reason to keep him around. He's not giving you any signs that he's going to turn things around, and you've got a lot of other guys that you would rather have his spot, but they were going to have to kind of swallow that pill that, this is the second highest paid player on our team. Again, money we could have spent elsewhere on someone more effective, maybe someone established in the majors. Instead, they take a big swing, and kind of ironic in that metaphor, in that with Yoshi, it was a big swing and a miss. Something that we saw from him all too often, and so they finally decided to do it. I think it came a little early than I expected. I know guys were probably calling for his head on opening day, but it's hard. It's really hard to say. I thought maybe they would give him at least the rest of May, but where things are at right now, I'm not sure that you would say Ji-Man Choi is ahead of schedule, but he is playing every day, or almost every day, at AAA Durham, with minor league baseball getting started. And from Kevin Cash today, Ji-Man Choi could be activated any day now. So it looks like a situation where that both of those things kind of worked in symphony, in that not only was Ji-Man Choi ready to come up, or he is close to being ready to get called up, but that Yoshi was performing so ineffectively. So those worked in tandem, and I think that ultimately encouraged the move. Again, we could see Ji-Man Choi tomorrow because it's against Garrett Cole, and I'm sure that would be a big boost to the lineup. I mean, have him hit leadoff for all I care. With Ji-Man Choi, it's interesting. The arthroscopic knee surgery in spring training, a lingering issue that they tried to give him some time off, and then he came back, and it wasn't healed. Kevin Cash kind of pointed that it was potentially a conditioning issue. Ji-Man Choi in the offseason went home to South Korea, and according to him, the COVID restrictions were such there that he was not able to go into his gym where he works out and work out. And so he came into spring training maybe a little bit out of shape. And for a big guy that is very flexible over there at first base, maybe if he wasn't doing all that yoga or whatever in the offseason that he does to do those splits over at the first base bag, then obviously that would make sense that the knee would kind of give in. And so everyone had alluded to, whether it's Cash, Neander, anyone in the front office, he was basically going to need this minor league assignment as basically a spring training. He still just needs to get conditioned and getting used to playing baseball every day. But I think for position players right now, the minor league assignment maximum is 14 days. So at this point, I think he could go about another week. But they're not going to go past that because I think they would have to option him, and I don't think he would clear waivers, certainly. So they're in a situation, and again, if they're saying that they're ready to call him up, then I'm sure he'll be ready whenever they do decide to make that move, and that's going to be very interesting to see, because at that point, where does Yandy get playing time? Because he does, should be getting it with what he does offensively, but what, are you going to make him everyday third baseman? Because Joey Wendell is the best average hitter that you have on your team right now. So that's going to be kind of tricky as well. But if Ji-Man Choi is the guy that he's been, then all that kind of goes away, and winning really solves all of that. And it's much easier to make roster and lineup decisions when you're winning every day than if you're not. Very interesting things to keep track of. The transaction log has been, very thorough. There's been a lot of stuff, and we haven't even talked about all the injuries. But we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we'll continue that discussion, and we also have tonight's 3-1 loss to the Yankees to discuss as we get back into the groove of kind of doing this everyday post-game show thing. It is very good to be back, and we appreciate everyone who's tuning in tonight, and tomorrow and the days that follow, we'll get back to the more traditional kind of format of taking calls and all that sort of thing, and look forward to having some of you guys back on the program at that time. So with that being said, at 11:36, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Rays Post Game on the William Haynes Show. We're live most nights within 15 minutes of the final out to break down everything that happened in that day's game and take listener phone calls to get your thoughts. As always, you call the show at 877-566-1020 or tweet the show at WHBC Official. Like you to remember that archives of previous shows can be found on this show's page on Spreaker.com and also on the WHBC YouTube channel. We look forward to having some of you on the show. Thanks for calling in.
HBC.
And at 11:38, about halfway through the program tonight, we return on the William Haynes Show. Yet to come, our discussion of tonight's 3-1 loss. In the meantime, we've been catching up on the games that we missed, the 10 games, in fact, and I think they went 6-4 over that stretch, so certainly not bad. We talked about Yoshi being DFA'd. We talked about Choi ready to come back up. And of course, with the games, and with that being said, the only thing that we really haven't talked about is the injury or the transaction log, and it has certainly been busy. The losses have certainly been greater than what they have gotten back, but we'll start with the positive. On May 1st, Cody Reed activated off the 10-day IL, and he's pitched multiple times since then and looks to be effective and good. I don't think he's quite turned into what the Rays had expected him to be in 2021. There was talk in spring training, of course, about him being a multi-inning weapon that is sharp against lefties and righties in the back ends of games. He opened for Michael Wacha in the final spring training game, and so it seemed like they were going to use him in the first, ninth inning and anywhere in between. That has not really been the case. He's just kind of a one-inning guy that pitches in the sixth or the seventh. And they haven't given him any super high leverage spots yet, but like I said, he's returned and I think has looked effective since then. Lewis Head has been up and down about 100 times. Is he on the roster as it stands right now? I'm trying to see. He is actually right now. We haven't seen him in quite some time. It seems like Hunter Strickland gets most of those kind of spots where kind of the B bullpen spot like Strickland did tonight in the top of the ninth with the Rays down 3-1. That's kind of that Lewis Head spot. Strickland has been getting those opportunities, but with all the injuries and such, Head is currently on the roster. I think we've only seen him like 2 or 3 times, but he's been on there. Also, Colin McHugh was activated on May 4th, and he has had one appearance since then. It was that game in Oakland where he opened for, I believe, Ryan Yarbrough, and he was incredibly sharp, a guy who was really struggling to start the year. I remember in that Miami series, in like either games 2 or 3, I think it was the third game, and they had him just pitching mop-up duty, and he was horrible. He hasn't pitched since 2019 going into the year, but his stuff, when he pitched, I'm trying to find the game against the A's. I don't know why I can't find it. So I'll pull that up. But he looked, like I said, incredibly sharp, and he'll actually be opening tomorrow. So it looks like maybe that's the role that they want to transition him to. He threw, 3 innings in that first appearance. It was in Anaheim against the Angels. That's why I couldn't find it. He opened for Josh Fleming on May the 6th. Through 2 innings, no runs, and 2 perfect innings, 5 strikeouts. 5 of his 6 outs was via the punch out. So extremely effective. The pitches looked as sharp as we've seen in a Rays uniform. A guy that I think going into the year they expected maybe could be kind of a swing man, kind of a Trevor Richards type, but maybe with more upside. Obviously, he was a part of that rotation with the Astros during kind of their trash Stros phase, if you want to say, where they obviously were cheating but winning a ton of games, and it wasn't just the offense. They had a terrific pitching staff as well. Verlander, Cole, Greinke there at the back end, Colin McHugh, Jose Urquidy, and all those guys, of course. I don't have to remind you. So there was a lot of potential with him there, and I think the point being with the 33-year-old right-hander is that we're finally seeing that upside, and we'll see his second appearance off the injured list tomorrow as he'll open probably 2 innings or so for Ryan Yarbrough. And then the other addition that they got back on the pitching side was Pete Fairbanks, and he's pitched a couple times since being activated. Looks fine. I recall waking up the day of opening day or the home opener on April the 9th and got the notification that he was going to be on the IL with a rotator cuff issue on his throwing shoulder, and he spent about a month on the injured list, which I don't think initially was that's longer than we were initially anticipating, is what I mean to say. But here we are in May. May 11th right now, and we have him back, so I guess that's all you can say. I think he's looked fine. He's Pete Fairbanks, I'll say that. You put him in a high leverage situation, he'll probably have a man at second, and he probably won't come across to score. So you're sitting on the edge of your seat. Maybe the heart rate, the blood pressure goes up a little bit, but the box score is an effect that he just always makes it very interesting. So that's not what you want in one of your top high leverage guys. I think he's like the second setup man behind Castillo. If in a perfect world, obviously Nick Anderson, your bona fide closer. Castillo setup man 1 and Fairbanks setup man 2, but instead, with everyone sliding down, I think Pete Fairbanks, as it stands today on the active roster, is probably the highest leverage guy that they have. There has not really been many save situations. Andrew Kittredge got the last save for the Rays, an inning and 2/3. So Fairbanks was the setup man essentially for Kittredge. So, and Thompson can be used in those spots as well. I think Fairbanks isn't as separated from the rest of those guys as like Castillo. So right now, it's anyone's game. Like I said, Kittredge, Thompson, Cody Reed eventually, and of course Fairbanks. So that's pretty much everyone that they've gotten back. And as I said, the losses were much greater. And all the roster transactions taking place, the Rays transferred Chris Archer, starting pitcher, from the 10-day injury list to the 60-day IL. He had taken some time away from the team. Of course, the lateral forearm tightness on that April 9th weekend against the Yankees. I think he started, it was either the Saturday or the Sunday game. I think it was the Saturday game. And he left the game after like the second or third inning. And that was only his second start of the year. So they're going to have to go from scratch with him by the time he finally comes back. I mean, he's going to pitch one inning, like 10 or 15 pitches his first time out. And that'll be in Durham, certainly. And as I said, he had taken some time away from the team. He had recently, I think about a week ago, lost his mother. And so, of course, he went up to North Carolina to his home and was attending to that business. So, and you wouldn't imagine going through something like that he's, focused on his throwing program. So that's kind of, I think, the thinking behind. He's not going to be ready anytime soon anyway. And moving him from the 10 to the 60-day IL opens up a spot on the 40-man. And with all the maneuverings that they've been making, that comes through certainly. Other losses, catcher Francisco Mejia, May 8th on the 10-day injured list with a left intercostal discomfort, which is in between your ribs in your rib cage. So they had him on the bench available the next day. They went with Kevin Smith instead, who was the second to final out tonight, I believe. Yes, he was. And so they just decided to play it safe with Frankie Mejia and put him on the IL, which I understand. Kevin Smith will be fine in his place, certainly not at Mejia's level, but with the way Zunino has been taken off, I think this is Zunino's chance, and he's certainly running with it right now. On May 9th, they placed Kevin Kiermaier, center fielder, on the 10-day injured list with a left wrist sprain. I think it was like in the first or second inning in that Sunday contest against the Athletics, sliding into second base on a stolen base attempt, and just jammed his wrist pretty bad on the bag. And he was definitely in pain, and they take him out of the game. So that's interesting. They'll be fine. They've got 4 or 5 guys probably that can play in the outfield, 2 guys that can play center with Phillips and Margot, and of course Arozarena and Meadows, who can play the corners, but Phillips and Margot can as well. So you have 4 outfielders, 2 that can play center. Lau and Wendell and Brasso can play the corners in kind of an emergency type situation. So they'll be fine in that regard. I don't think they need 5 outfielders, to be frank with you, but Kevin Kiermaier is probably not the guy that you want to lose. It's kind of funny. It's not funny, but this is the Kevin Kiermaier experience. It's May 11th, and he's already been on the injured list 2 times. So one was a hamstring or a quad, and this one with the wrist. You can't help it, but he's had way too many of those finger or wrist issues sliding into second base. So that's just one of those things, and that's what's going on right now. And then kind of some other minor moves being made. Ryan Sheriff, the left-handed pitcher, he pitched, I think, on opening day and then kind of went off the grid for a little bit. He had semi-retired. He is just not in a good headspace, I think, with the sport. There was an article that he was saying he was on the mound and he didn't have like any competitive spirit at all. If you've ever played a sport, I played high school football. I could not imagine being on the field and like not feeling anything. So I think he made the right move, kind of stepping away for a little bit. But he's a guy that's had a very interesting baseball journey. As I said, he was on the restricted list and was working out with Durham. But with him now being optioned to the team officially, I guess he can appear in games now if he was not able to before. And so he's a guy that could be back in the mix here shortly. I assume he's been throwing and everything. And then Kevin Padlow was called up today for his second time this season, with Yoshi being DFA'd, as we said, and we're still awaiting word on Yoshi on if he will accept his assignment to AAA or not. Because of his contract, he doesn't have to. So Padlow was called up. I don't think he's going to be on there for long. I think the next roster move to be made, whether it's tonight, it's tomorrow, the day after that, J-Man Choi up, Padlow down 1-for-1. That's, if you're asking, well, how long is Kevin Padlow going to be up here? As long as it takes for J-Man Choi to be ready. That's the answer to that, I would say. He's still looking for his first big league hit. I think he's had like almost 10 at-bats now. Was 0-for-2 tonight with a strikeout and a ground out to third with a couple of men in scoring position. So I was kind of surprised he gave him that opportunity, but it was a righty-lefty thing. Brandon Lau wasn't even in the lineup tonight, and Lau pinch hit for Padlow in the 7th and took the final 2 at-bats in that spot in the order. So I think in the meantime he's going to be used kind of as a platoon guy. He's kind of the odd man out in the infield. He only got the start tonight, again, because of righty-lefty. I would personally rather have Wendell in there. I don't care about righty-lefty in that situation. I think Wendell is better against lefties than probably Padlow is, but Neil Solondz in the postgame show tonight was saying Wendell is 5-for-28 with no extra base hits against lefties this year. And obviously in this audio-only format, I didn't want to just run through the list of all of the guys, but I know that's a big talking point around this team right now is their struggles against left-handers, particularly starters. And I don't know exactly how that gets turned around. Margot and Zunino have been the best hitters against lefties this year, and they've both been, I think, very good. Zunino is as good as he's ever been, I think, as a Ray. Margot has been kind of the same player ever since finding that groove, mid to late August of 2020, and he's been terrific ever since. So, but guys like Mike Brasso has not been good against lefties. Arozarena, who was hitting 300, I think, when we went off the air 10 or 11 days ago. As of right now, he is batting 258 after an 0-for-4 tonight. And I understand, it's May 11th. Batting averages is going to change a lot. An 0-for-4 probably dropped him like 5 points or so. I don't know. But he has certainly fallen back to earth. And you talk about their struggles against lefties. I think a big part of that is I think it's ultimately a good thing that the Rays are so balanced. You look at a team like the Yankees. Tonight they had eight right-handed bats and 1 lefty. They had a switch hitter, but they scratched Hicks tonight. The Rays, I think they're just about even as far as right and left-handed hitters. So I think, again, you talk about law of averages over the long stretch. It's going to be good to have those lineups. I think the Rays could probably go 9 righties or 9 lefties. I know last season they were the first team in recorded baseball history to start 9 left-handed batters ever, that was really cool. But that just shows you how versatile they are, and that's exactly what it is, versatility. But they only have 4 or 5 right-handed hitters that you would consider legit, like everyday guys. And obviously the righties, those are the ones that are supposed to mash lefties. Well, Randy has not been quite there this year. Again, 258 average. He'll continue to hit leadoff, which I think is interesting. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. Margot has been good. Zunino has been good against lefties. Yandy Diaz is in some kind of, funk is not the right word. He's a completely different player now. I don't even know exactly what's going on. He's a walk single only kind of guy. So he's not really giving you that pop off of lefties that you want, although he does hit the other way quite a bit. Again, Brasso has not been good against lefties. Adames has not been really good, period. He's hitting 184 after an 0 for 3 tonight. With all those guys, those are your guys, like I said, and none of those are really, dominating. You've got 2 out of those 5, say, that are good against lefties, and so that's where those struggles come from. But you're going to see a lot more righties over the long stretch, and they've got a lot of lefty everyday bats that have been terrific. Brandon Lau, Joey Wendell, Austin Meadows, Kevin Kiermaier, G-Man Choi when he comes back. Right now, it's something that I guess people are looking at it as an issue. I don't necessarily see it as an issue. It's a byproduct of the roster decision they made. I think that that's the right choice to have that split against righties and lefties. But like the Rays have, if you're playing lefties every day, well, yeah, that's not going to look so good. Because you're not, you're not like the Yankees. With New York having 8 right-handed bats in the lineup every night, of course they're going to, demolish lefties, and that's exactly what they've done this year. I think that's just the reality of that, and I only bring it up just because it's been a big talking point, and I don't mean to kind of dismiss it. It is an issue. The offense as a whole, any way you want to splice it, batting average, on-base percentage is probably the only thing that they're good at right now. They're bad with men on base. They're bad with men in scoring position. Their strikeout numbers are as high as anyone's. They're probably top 5 in the majors. I know they're number 1 against left-handed pitching in all of Major League Baseball. The power numbers are not there. They're probably towards the bottom in home runs, extra base hits. Like I said, any stat, any way you want to splice it, the Rays are probably underperforming potentially, I guess, of their potential. So that's where they're at right now. But there's a lot of moves to be made. It's weird because everyone on the injured list right now is pretty much a pitcher. But they don't need pitching right now. Their pitching is terrific. It will get better. But nights like tonight, you can't really ask much better than holding the New York Yankees to 3 runs. A solo blast to Judge, 1 to Sanchez, and kind of a weird multiple pass ball situation in the third. That's terrific. That's all you can really ask for. So what? This team is not going to make the playoffs only winning when they hold their opponents to 2-1 or no runs. That's just not going to happen because you can't do that day in and day out. The Rays, you hold the Yankees to 3 runs, you need to score 4. And unlike most nights, there was not really opportunities. They had the home run for Zunino, but that was kind of an isolated incident. I mean, they had some other deep flyouts in the game, but really the only opportunity for the Rays came in the 4th. A leadoff double for Margot, strikeout Meadows, Jordan Montgomery was as much of an intentional walk to Diaz as you can get without putting up the 4 fingers. He did not want to deal with Yandy there for whatever reason. And then he struck out Brasso, and he got Kevin Padlo to ground out. But that was pretty close to being Kevin's first big league hit, and that would have been a big spot. I know he had an at-bat with the bases loaded, I think his last time up, coincidentally at home against the Yankees, so that's kind of funny. It's like Groundhog Day or deja vu for Padlo, which it's kind of interesting how that worked out. But either way, and then the only thing I think that I didn't mention, I would be extremely remiss if I didn't. May 5th, Diego Castillo placed on the 10-day IL with right groin tightness. So I don't know exactly what causes that. From a pitcher, I'm glad that it's not an upper body issue because those always tend to be more difficult. And then speaking of a lower body injury for a pitcher, also starter Michael Wacha, May 4th on the 10-day IL, and they're thinking he's going to be fine. I mean, he was running around kind of doing his, in between starts kind of routine. And he just hamstring tightened up, and obviously you don't want to pitch with that, so they put him on the IL. And I think there's a little bit of a surplus right now on starting pitchers anyway. Like, I think Waka and Rich Hill are going to be kind of on their way out. Maybe not on their way out of the roster, but just out of their way out of the rotation. Patino and McClanahan, I think, will both eventually have their own spots in the rotation. You've got Yarbrough, Fleming, Glasnow, and those are your 5. And then, there could be potentially more on the way. I don't think anytime soon, but, Archer will be back, etc. So, Waka and Hill, I think, were kind of bridges to this point anyway. So, it's not a huge loss. I'm more concerned, obviously, about Castillo than I am about Waka, but I think both will be fine relatively shortly, and good to see that it's lower body injuries and that it hopefully won't be as arduous to get them back. So finally, we're 50 minutes into the program. We're not going to take a break. We'll blow right through that, but just to I guess, as I joke all the time, I guess I'm just pushing it off because this is not a game that I'm thrilled to discuss. I'm always thrilled to be on the air and speaking with you, of course, but this was a tough pill to swallow. I was at the game. I should have posted it on Twitter, but I was in the Rays Discord server, and I know a lot of my listeners, they know me from there. My 4th game of the season, and the 4th against the Yankees. I went to all 3 of that weekend series against New York, and I'm going to the game tomorrow as well. So my first 5 games will be against the Yankees. What is it already? It's just how it worked out. But great to be in the Trop tonight. In front of, or amongst, I was one of 5,441 paid attendance. Kind of surprised that I thought that would be a little more, but it is during the week, and attendance is still capped at 9,000. So I understand with ticket prices and things of that nature, it's they're not really going to get 9,000 every night with obviously the law of supply and demand. But not to bore you with that, this is not microeconomics. This is baseball. Hello. So tonight, I guess we'll just jump right into it. The lineup for Tampa Bay defensively in the outfield from left to right with no Kiermaier. It's Arozarena in left, Brett Phillips in center, Manuel Margot in right field, and then in the infield from third to first, Kevin Padlo at third, Willy Adames at shortstop, Mike Brasso at second. At first base, it was Yandy Diaz, and Mike Zunino did the catching, and Austin Meadows was the DH. And then the way they ordered the lineup, Arozarena led off, which he has done a lot more consistently since we last spoke. Margot at 2, Meadows 3, Yandy batting cleanup, Brasso at 5, Padlo at 6, and then 7-8-9, of Zunino, Adames, and Phillips, save for the regulars of Lau and Wendell being out of the order. This has become a traditional lineup. Margot is going to bat at the top of the order now. I'm fine with that. Yandy, I don't know why he's batting cleanup. I don't like him in that spot, but that's just where he is right now. He's got to be somewhere. I would like to see him hit leadoff, but Ji-Man Choi coming up shortly is only going to kind of confuse all that. They've got a lot of guys who could play, leadoff, and someone has to hit cleanup. I think Lau, I've said this all season and I'll stand by it, Lau needs to be the everyday cleanup hitter. He doesn't play today, so obviously you don't get that opportunity. Lau came in later as a pinch hitter, and maybe the only other interesting decision, this was the second straight time that Zunino had caught Patino. Patino's first 2 starts were caught by Francisco Mejia, his teammate last season in San Diego. And the significance of that, of course, was the 2 pass balls in the 3rd inning, which I suppose we will discuss now because that was, certainly kind of, I consider that it ended up kind of being the game-winning play. So the situation, it was a 1-out single in the 3rd inning by DJ LeMahieu. He gets to second base on a walk that was issued to Giancarlo Stanton. So first and second with 1 out in a 1-0 game in the 3rd. And then it was kind of a cross-up. Zunino was asked about it, but we didn't really get a definite answer whether it was a cross-up or... He said it was a miscommunication of some kind. And so those runners moved to second and third. Then in that at-bat, that same at-bat to Aaron Judge, another pass ball. It was just a slider that kept sliding away from Zunino's glove, gets to the backstop, and the runner from third base, which was LeMahieu, comes home. Stanton to third with only one out, and Judge ends up lining out to left, and thankfully wasn't deep enough to drive in a run. I mean, that didn't really affect the final score. The Rays still would have lost. But in that situation, with it being 2-0, they kept it there. So that was just interesting. One of Zunino's calling cards is that he is very good with the pitchers. He's, very good defensively, but also calls a good game. Communication usually is on point, and it just, I guess, seemed like that there was an issue of some kind, and it cost the Rays runs in a 3-1 game. And as Neil Solondz was mentioning on the post-game, the official post-game, I should say, a 2-1 game against New York is very different. How you play offensively is different. In a 3-1 game, you pretty much are just trying to get someone on and hit a home run. That's where baseball is now. But if you're down 1 run, get a guy on first, maybe steal second, then single him home, something like that. And so that sequence in the third inning with the pass balls, 2 in a row, that ended up really being the game. I don't think you ultimately knocked Zunino, mainly because in the bottom of that frame, and again, it's funny how that always works, he led off the inning and he hit that big home run, 472 feet. So ultimately, you're fine with what he put out tonight. But from the pitching standpoint, that was kind of the main storyline. Patino, this is as far as he's gone. In the loss, he's now 1-1 on the year, which is kind of, he has a win already. I don't know when that would have come. It was the 3-inning, I guess, relief appearance. Yeah, because he hasn't gone 5 to start a game, so he's come in relief at least once. But anyway, he threw tonight 65 pitches, so that was up 9 from his last outing, 56 against Los Angeles. So he's gone from 42 to 43 to 56 to 64 pitches. There was discussion, at least on the radio call, that they were going to maybe try and get him at 5th up, meaning just to start, maybe face a batter or 2 in the 5th inning. I guess instead, at that time in the game, they just decide that he's going to go 4, and he was probably at his pitch, 65 was probably his pitch limit anyway. And he ends up going out after that. 4 innings pitched, 3 hits, 2 runs, only 1 earned, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. And then you look at his strike numbers: 65 pitches, 35 for strike, so about half. And then faced 16 men and threw first pitch strike to only 5 of the 16, which, if you know me, that's always kind of a calling card. That's an easy telltale sign in the box score to the success of really any pitcher, but more so the starters than the relievers. I said this his first start. It was against Toronto on that Sunday afternoon in Tropicana Field. He's got a little bit of Blake Snell in him, in that long at-bats, just the pitch count kind of goes up. He only had 1 walk, but the strike numbers were certainly not there. In spring training, they were raving about his control and his strike throwing. We haven't really seen that. And then tonight, kind of a new development. He's had a good amount of swing and miss in his other starts. This doesn't tell the complete story, but 5 strikeouts in 3 innings his last time, 2 strikeouts in 2 innings, and then 3 Ks in 3 strikeouts in 2 2/3. So the strikeout numbers were down, but also a lot more foul balls rather than swing and misses or whatever else. So whether you take that as a sign of his pitches aren't as deceptive right now, I didn't exactly see. Obviously, the television broadcast is kind of the best way to kind of see the game, unless you're sitting behind home plate or something. Where my seat was, I was kind of from the side, so I didn't really see kind of his movement. But the 2 and 4 seam fastballs and the slider, and he was missing with the slider, whether it was away or down. And then the fastballs, I think, were just being hit around a little bit too. So 4 innings of 1 earned run, I mean, that's fine. 65 pitches, so if he was fully stretched out, he probably goes 5 or 6. He had faced the lineup. He was working a second time through. He had faced the 7-hitter Sanchez a second time, and that was the last batter he saw. So the order was coming around a third time through, and not only was the pitch count things there, the Rays obviously are going to anyone not named Tyler Glasnow has a low likelihood of seeing an order a third time through. That's just the way it's going to be. Even Blake Snell was under that ruling apparently, and who knows, Glasnow may be too in the postseason, although we certainly hope not. But for Patino, in a good way, it's inevitable. He's going to be a part of the starting rotation. The Rays have decided he's ready now, and so they've made the move, and they're stretching him out at the big league level. And all in all, no complaints. But like I said, there's some Blake Snell in his game, and there are always going to be things about that's frustrating. But better than Rich Hill, probably better than Michael Wacha. So. You take that and you run with it. I think that's kind of the same mindset for Shane McClanahan. I'm not sure Shane is ready. I think he could do good with some time in Durham still, but there is some sense of urgency with this team right now, and you can tell with the moves that they're making, maybe a little bit early with call-ups than they would be otherwise, because this team needs a spark, and some of the guys they brought in via free agency are not exactly what they expected. Wacha, I think, has been good. Maybe you would even say he's exceeding initial expectations, but Rich Hill, although he has been good lately, and maybe it's a turnaround, but I don't know, has not been excellent either. And so the point is, not just in the long run, but for one night, yes, 21-year-old Patino over 41-year-old Rich Hill. It's amazing there's 20 years between them. That's, Rich Hill was 1 year away from buying a beer before Luis Patino was even born, which that's insane when you put it in that context. It's going to be one of those things. He could end up being very good. I think 1 for 1, I can say for a fact with what Blake Snell has put out this year, he can't even get through a 5th inning most times. I'm talking about Snell. And so if Patino even does that, matches that, and then you got 3 other players in the trade, Mejia, Blake Hunt, and Cole Wilcox, who are probably all going to end up being good players as well. We are talking a highway robbery that's probably even to a greater extent than the Chris Archer trade, because Glasnow is a Cy Young type guy. Meadows, I don't know. I think he'll be okay, and obviously Shane Baz. But the 4 players they got in return for Snell might end up even being a better return, which is, if you're a team and Eric Neander calls you, I'm blocking his number. I'm not even taking his calls, because I don't know. I've said before in the show, the siren songs of Eric Neander, how he kind of coaxes these GMs into making these moves. It is getting to an absurd point. You've seen the same thing kind of in the NFL with the Patriots. Why even take the calls? They always win the trade. So that's kind of interesting, and that I think will kind of always be, because Luis Patino kind of was not necessarily the crown jewel, because they were all kind of very young and prospects. None of them were big league guys necessarily. But Luis Patino was the guy, that ESPN, whoever would list first. He was kind of the big name of the trade. And so he will always be kind of held in comparison to Blake Snell. And so I have not even complaints, minor concerns about Patino. But I think right now you could argue he's probably as good as Blake Snell, at least if you look at the numbers, because it's funny. People in San Diego are already kind of scratching their head at Blake Snell, and it's the same issues that he had in Tampa Bay, where the pitch count is through the roof. He's not establishing strikes. I don't want to do another Blake Snell takedown. I'm thankful for what he gave to Tampa Bay and the Cy Young and everything, but it's, I think if you're a Rays fan, you're very thankful for what you have, and I'll try not to do this every time, but like I said, it's very easy to kind of hold Patino in this context because of how he came over. So I'll always kind of look at him in that way because that's why he's here. But the 4 innings tonight, he may get a 5th up and maybe 70 pitches next time, so he's getting pretty close to being fully stretched out. I mean, it could be by June by the time he's at 100 pitches if everything goes fine, if there's no injuries or anything. After that, it was Josh Fleming, 4 innings, himself with 1 run. So very interesting, a pure tandem start. 2 guys going 4 innings, and Fleming could have even probably gone 5, but they decided to make the change to Strickland in the 9th, which is fine. Fleming, 4 innings, 1 run, 3 hits, so like an identical line to Patino. 1 walk and 1 strikeout. And they both allowed a home run. And look at this as well. This is kind of blowing my mind. For Patino, 65 pitches, 35 strikes. So 65-35. For Fleming, 63-37. So, again, identical. Fleming was better with the first pitch strike, though, in the 16 men that he faced. And they both faced 16 batters. Wow. Fleming goes 11 for 16 in establishing the first pitch strike. So you'll have to excuse me being mind blown by this. I think that's kind of an interesting thing that they had the exact same stat line almost. And Fleming was fine. Fleming was Fleming, I think, is what I would say. He just gets guys out. That's kind of just who he is right now. This was Ryan Yarbrough's spot in the rotation. I totally understand why they pushed him back a day. Because Yarbrough, he needs a pure opener because he's a guy that could probably go 5 or 6 potentially. So you don't want to just stuff him for 2 or 3 innings behind Patino on a Tuesday night. Don't do that. So have Fleming do that, and then have, Yarbrough will be pitching in the 2nd or 3rd inning tomorrow rather than have him come in the 5th, which is not really Yarbrough's game. So Fleming, who pitched kind of in this role, in the playoffs last year, I remember in the World Series he's done this, so I understand that, and that was fine. I don't have major gripes with either of them. They both gave up a solo home run, so again, kind of and both 2 outs, bases empty home runs. This is getting weirder and weirder, every time I look at this. Kind of the same. Fleming did a little bit better job at throwing strikes, but not by much. The staff as a whole, 147 pitches, 85 strikes. Not that you can really conceptualize what that means. I just, they could have been a little better, although they only walked 2 men over 9 innings. So, I guess that's not really something to complain about. And it wasn't like they were missing length from either of those guys. So it's ultimately something that doesn't really matter too much. Instead of kind of going down 1 for 1, I mean, everyone's at bat. I mean, a lot of 0-fers tonight. Randy Arozarena 0 for 4. Meadows 0 for 4. Adames 0 for 3. And then a lot of other guys had a couple at bats and got pinch hit for. Brasso 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts. Gets lifted for Wendell, who grounds out. Who gets lifted for Kevin Smith, who lines out. And then Padlo 0 for 2 with a strikeout. Gets lifted for Lau, who goes 0 for 1 with a strikeout and a walk. And then, of course, Zunino with the home run. Adames 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. So, overall, the lineup, they struck out 11 times and walked 3 times. Only 3 hits as well. As 3 walks and 3 hits. I mean, that's kind of absurd as well. That's not a good stat line. 1 run on 3 hits. For the Yanks, by the way, it was 3 runs on 7 hits and 1 error. The Rays did not have any errors, thankfully. And that's another thing, too. I don't know if I mentioned that not only was the Angels' bullpen, I'm talking back to the 4-game sweep, but their defense was horrendous. In one of the games, the Angels had 4 errors alone, and there was other plays that weren't ruled errors that basically were. So, made the offense, I guess, look a little bit better than it is, because I think this is the normal. This is the rule. The sweep of the Angels was the exception to the rule. 1 run on 3 hits tonight. This is the rule. So, which is a matter of fact of when does this change and how is it going to change. And right now, I can't really tell you how that exactly is going to be the case. We just got to keep moving along and stay in the hunt. And at a game over right now, the Rays, I guess you would say, is doing that. So, and again, the only other they were 0 for 3 with runners in scoring position in the 4th inning. Leadoff double Margot, his 5th of the year, and then a strikeout for Meadows. Diaz walked, as I said. Brasso strikeout, Padlo ground out, but it was a good ground out. Good that he put it in play and exit velo, everything. And the only extra base hits, Margot with his 5th double of the year, and Zunino with his 7th homer, which is tied for the team lead with Meadows. So only 2 extra base hits. Well, 2 of the 3 were for extra bases, so I suppose that's not bad. The only other hit was a Brett Phillips single. It was they had him with 2 strikes. They moved the third baseman all the way over near second because he's not going to bunt, but he kind of did. It was like a swinging bunt where he was obviously trying to go the other way with it, and it was an open gap, and he got on. So again, not a lot of offense to be had. I'm kind of ready to turn the page on tonight. They actually finished 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position, so that was okay in the 9th inning. Because, let me talk about this first. This was this is what I led off the show with. Another bad break for the Rays. So, in the 9th inning, Austin Meadows, a routine ground out to Gleyber Torres. Torres commits an error, and Meadows gets safely to first, E6. Then Yandy Diaz, while Yandy Diaz is at the plate, wild pitch to the backstop. Meadows takes off for second, but terrible break for the Rays. Ball caroms right off the backstop directly into the glove of Sanchez. Gary throws a rope down to second base. Meadows called out at second. Base runner erased, 1 out, base is clear. Yandy gets walked with 1 out. So it would have been first and second with nobody out. And against Chapman, by the way. Diaz gets the second on defense's indifference. And then Kevin Smith, who pinch hits for Wendell for whatever reason. It was righty-lefty. But hits a liner right to Gleyber Torres. If it was a couple inches higher, it would have been a base hit. And then maybe you've got runners at the corners, or no, that would have been a run in 3-2, and maybe Kevin Smith at first or even second base potentially if it gets in the alley. But instead it's caught, and then with a runner at second, 2-run deficit, 2 outs, Brandon Lau strikes out for the last out of the game. Just couldn't catch up to Aroldis Chapman in that spot, and so that was the game. So they catch a tough break. Chapman has struck literally half of his outs this year are via the strikeout. I mean, he is just mowing people down this year. Collects his 8th save. He was neck and neck with Castillo of the Rays there for a little bit, but with Castillo on the IL and Chapman playing at this unbelievable rate, he's yet to give up an earned run. A 0.000 ERA for him, and hopefully we don't see him again in this series, although we might. Garrett Cole on the mound tomorrow for the Yanks. And then the following day, it's going to be Jameson Taillon. We'll see him for the first time this year. So, turning the page to tomorrow, it will be Colin McHugh opening and Yarbrough following. And then on the other side for the visitors, Garrett Cole. Let's take a look at Garrett Cole now. The 30-year-old right-hander is 4-1 on the season with a 1.61 ERA. His last time out was last Thursday against the Houston Astros. Goes 7 innings of 2 runs, both solo shots. I think both to Yordan Alvarez, by the way. 97 pitches. And he has faced the Rays this year on April 18th in Yankee Stadium against Tampa Bay. Gets the loss, 6 1/3 of 2 runs on 5 hits, no walks, 10 strikeouts. So I would imagine probably a performance of the same. If Montgomery can go 6 innings of a run, I know Cole is a righty, but I'm thinking at least the same, unless things are drastically different. Maybe J-Man Choi gets called up and hits a home run, because he has certainly owned Garrett Cole lately. Kiermaier has been good against Cole, so there are guys, maybe even Adames, I don't know. And then, as I said, for the Rays side, McHugh will probably go 2 innings, and then Yarbrough for probably 4 or 5. It depends on the way the game goes, but they don't want him to see the order the third time through. Like, there was a moment tonight where by the time Patino was done, if the score was tied or the Rays were leading, they would have bullpenned it. They had Thompson warming, and they had Reed and Kittredge and Fairbanks, so they could have done that. They could have gone that way. But instead, they were losing, so they're like, all right, we're going to stick to the plan. Fleming for 4 innings. Let's save these relievers. So kind of the same thing goes for tomorrow, where with McHugh getting you 2 on the front end, barring him getting like blown up or something, Yarbrough for 4, that gets you through 6. So you that's your typical like bullpen type stage in the game, and you can line it up. Kittredge for the 7th, Thompson for the 8th, and like Fairbanks for the 9th. However they want to line it up. Cody Reed in there as well. So that's how I would anticipate maybe them doing things. But if they're losing, kind of like Yarbrough started against the Astros, he'll just have to eat it and get innings, because that's kind of where they are at right now. If you're going to lose, at least save the arm. So looking at Ryan Yarbrough, his last couple of outings, his last appearance, and it was a start outright. I don't know why they did this against the Astros at home. 6 innings, 5 runs on 9 hits, and a lot of those, if not all of them, I think like 4 of them in the first inning. And again, they just had him kind of wear it. 103 pitches as well, and finished, I guess, okay, but 6 innings of 5 runs is nothing to write home about. His start against the Yankees, or behind an opener, I should say, came after Kittredge in Yankee Stadium on April 18th, Sunday afternoon. 5 innings, 1 run on 2 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. So that was a day where his control was not really there, and he was not establishing his pitches like he wanted, and still got 5 of a run. So if they could get that from him again, like I said, that would be great. Fine, they can work with that. The game is going to come down to whether they're scoring off of Cole anyway. So that's going to be kind of the story of the game. So with that being said, closing tonight's program, thank you everyone for listening. We'll be taking your calls tomorrow, the rest of the week, back to almost an everyday schedule. I'll be going to the game tomorrow, so we'll probably be on the air at about 11 o'clock or so, as we were tonight. It's so good to be back. We are no longer in May 11th, but I just want to say, Andy Freed, play-by-play radio guy for the Rays, he turned 50 years old yesterday, so happy birthday to Andy Freed. My favorite baseball broadcaster. I look up to you. You're my role model. You gave me the love for that industry. So happy birthday to him. Hopefully the Rays win tomorrow against Garrett Cole. We'll be on the air, and we'll talk to you then.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM and Sports Radio 66. The Fan.
HBC